today I'm going to paint a miniature like I normally do, but I decided to do a voiceover at the same time, well, not a voiceover, to talk you through it while I do it. The reason I'm doing this is because I want you to see the process as I'm talking about it. Normally I don't speak during these ones because it's quite relaxing for me just to do, but I thought I'd try something different. So my goal today is to paint a landscape, and I have in mind, again, having a lake in front, but I really want to try and use purples and oranges together. And the reason that I use purple and orange is because they go really well together. They're colors that like each other and complement each other really well. I have my 2 glasses of water here. As you can see, one's actually pretty dirty. I should change it. I'm lazy, can't be bothered moving. So this is the one that I use to rinse off my brush, and this is the one that I use to pick up some clean water. So my brush is already clean. I'm dipping it in the water, and some people, they spray their paints first with water to moisten them up. I've never been in the habit of doing that, and the reason for that is because I never had a spray bottle. That's the only reason. So I've kind of learnt to load up my brush with water and just kind of drip some of the paint on, drip some of the water on the paints that I think I might use. And as you can see, my palette's always quite a mess because I tend to use similar colors all the time. So I wanted purple and orange, and because I can and I'm the artist, I've decided I'm going to change it today. I'm going to do green and orange. So I'm going to, normally I'd go straight onto dry, but I'm going to wet my sky first, and there's already a drop of water. I've already taped up my mini. I do this all the time. It's the same size I've always used. I just got used to the size and I really like it. Tape and this little block. I make up my own blocks as, again, I couldn't find one that I wanted, and so what I did was just make my own. So I am using some of my Fire Engine Red, or I think it's Scarlet Lake, and a yellow to mix a nice, vibrant, very intense orange, and I'm dropping it into the sky. Rinse off my brush, wipe it off, pick up some more clean water, grab some yellow, drop that in. Now, because the paper's wet, it's already doing the work for me. You'll notice that I'm leaving that top bit white. I'm doing that intentionally. I'm going to go in and pick up some of this pigment in the middle. That's too bulky for me, for my liking. And that will automatically create this cloud shape that I'm after. I do like that up there. I'm picking up more yellow, and very gently, because the paper's still damp, it's flowing beautifully. I'm getting some hard edges and some soft edges, which is what you want, because that's what happens in nature. You get some hard edges and some soft edges, and our brain interprets that as different patterns in the clouds as the wind's pushing it around. Now, I've had too much red on my brush, and it's dropping a lot more pigment than I want. Over here, those lines are too hard. I don't like them. So I'm rinsing off my brush, wiping it off, and I'm trying to soften and pick up some of the paint. Over here, I'll do the same thing. And the thing with watercolor is it's clever enough to make the shapes on its own if you just let it. I'm going to pick up some more paint in here and whiten that bit there. And that will give me another cloud shape, which I quite like. Now, before this fully dries, I'm going to go over with some clean water and just soften up those edges there. And I'm going to bring it right down, because I know that I'm going to have a lake in here. This is going to be the reflection of the sky, these colours in the water down below. Now you can see that's starting to harden some of those edges there. I'm going to soften a few of them. Now my brush does have some water in it, which is good. But as I move across the painting, it's going to pick up different colours, and I don't particularly want it to spread all over my painting, so I'm quite careful. I'm wiping my brush off in between. Now, I think those edges are too hard, so I'm going from the lighter bit and pushing the pigment back out. And I feel like I've lost a lot of intensity on this side, and there's a lot over here. And when you're watching a sunset, you'll often notice there's a focal point of intensity in one part, but there does get reflections in other parts of the sky of that same intensity, and that's what I want to bring over. So I've gone in with straight lines over here, which is probably an unusual choice, but I can soften them out and try and bring up that intensity again. And you've noticed I've left this bottom section. That's because I'm waiting for some of that to really dry out before I start working on it again. Okay, now I've got a green already here from old paintings, so I'm just putting some water in it. I'm picking up some sap green, which is kind of a light green, and I know that these two colors, they work really well together. So sap green, and you can see that as I'm putting it down, it's kind of spreading out and feathering a little bit. That's okay. I might bring the camera down just a bit more so you can see. It's feathering out quite a lot, and that's okay. Rinsing off my brush, and I want to take off that hard edge at the bottom. So I rinsed my brush off, wiped off the excess, and now I'm just getting the water and bringing it down. Now it's making the colour underneath just that little bit more muted and a little bit muddy, but I can fix that up later. Now you'll see in some of these that orange colour has kind of mixed in and shines through the green just a little bit. That's fine. For me, that kind of imitates how the light of a sunset gets reflected in distant trees, because light always gets reflected on different surfaces. So I've picked up some more darker colour that's already been on my palette, and now I'm looking for a horizon line. Because the sky is quite intense and quite bold, I want to keep that almost as the focus. So I'm going to put the horizon line down slightly, down here, because I don't want it to be the thing that you see first. I want that skyline to be the first thing that you see. So I've rinsed off my brush and I'm wiping off all that excess. And there's a little circle in the top here that I've noticed. I don't like it. So with clean water, I'm just going to and I'm going to feather out that circle shape as much as I can, because I don't like that it looks like a perfect circle. I want to try and maintain that light area. So I'm not trying to drag pigment into the area, I'm trying to push it away. And I think that's worked. So the horizon line is drying slightly. I'm going to go back in, more water, and pick up some more pigment. So I'm picking up Perylene green now, and I'm going to mix it with sap green, which is my go-to. I like that combination. I'm going to run along the horizon line again. It's still wet, so it's expanding as I'm going along. Now what I like to do is, because this is going to represent a lake area underneath, I'm just going to try and feather that out a bit more. See how there's lightness here and there's lightness here? If possible, I want to keep that because it's like a reflection of like the last rays of the sun. So I don't want to cover that up if I possibly can. But it's still looking quite weak. And this is what we call the ugly stage. This is where it doesn't look any good. And most people stop here and think, oh, I don't like watercolor, it doesn't work for me. This is where you need to keep going without doing too much, overworking your painting. And the way to do that is to think about lights and darks. Everything at the moment is the same tone, it's the same level of lightness. We don't have dark darks, but we do have light lights. That's these little sections here. We want now to bring in that pop, bring in that contrast. So I've picked up some more perylene green, quite a lot of it. There's not much water on my brush. And again, I'm going to go across that horizon line. Now look at what's happened. It's feathering not as much, just a tiny wee bit. But just that darkness has helped to bring this landscape to life. Now, like I said, see how those light shapes, they've receded slightly? That's because all that paper's still wet, and that little layer that we put on before has seeped into those sections automatically. I didn't have to do anything for it. Now I'm going to very gently just get some darker pigment, and I'm going to pull it up. Now because it's still very slightly wet, it's not a hard line, there's still some texture in there, which is what we want, because this is now closer to us. And because it's closer to us, we're going to see a lot more detail. I'm going to put in a few tall trees in here because I think we're close enough, those mountains feel close enough that you would see some quite tall outstanding trees. Not too tall, otherwise it won't look in proportion. You notice I did it on the right hand side. Now I did it kind of subconsciously, but it just shows that there's balance between the two. Because our focal point of our sky is on this side, we want to balance it out on the other side with something that's equally as focusing but not taking away from the whole picture. In watercolor, people think it's about the color. It's called watercolor for a reason. It's the water that affects your painting, not necessarily the color. The amount of water versus the amount of color in your brush. You can see I'm getting some very defined lines. That's because the paper underneath is quite dry and I have hardly any water in my brush. If I had more water, the nature of the brush would just dump it all on the page and you'd get these very blobby looks. So it's all about learning to control the amount of water in your brush and the amount of color in your brush. Now I've picked up more of the perylene green and I'm pulling it over the horizon line again because that's where I want people to focus. Oops. That was a mistake, so I'm going to have to increase the eye line there a little. Now you'll see here, that's kind of lightened up just ever so slightly. I'm not sure if you can see it. Let's see if we can focus this here. Very ever so slightly lightened in this section here. I'm going to keep that. And I'll just do a few little twigs or sticks over here. We don't want to take the focus from the right hand side because there's already a lot going on the left hand side, so we want to keep it as balanced as we can. But it would look weird if we didn't add anything on the left hand side. It'll just look like everything's growing on one side and not the other. So now I've decided just to put texture, okay, and your brain will interpret that as trees. And rinsed off my brush again, picking up some clean water. Now, because it feels like we're standing right in the middle here, to add that extra oomph, I'm going to put some extra little things right in the foreground that's going to be as dark as anything. So I'm going to pick up perylene green again, so much and it's going to be like a very sharp line like that. And it's going to feel like we're standing on a headland looking across the bay or across the lake. And this is what gives it that feeling of depth, okay? because you have something very dark right up near you. Then you've got like a horizon line where it's very clear that you can see where the water ends and where the mountains and the landscape starts. And then you've got this vast sky in the background. Now, most of you know that I use a lot of gold. Well, actually, I don't use a lot of gold. I use gold in almost every painting, but it's the amount. Again, it's about balance and what you can and can't see, and letting the brain do most of the working out for you. So I'm not sure if you can see it, but here there is a circle shape, which I don't particularly like, but it's in a good place. It's kind of about nearly a third, not quite halfway, and that's a good place for a moon. So I'm going to use that mistake, I guess, in the painting to add my pop of gold. So I'm picking up my gold, which this particular gold, because it's handmade, can be a bit temperamental, so I have to get a bit of water, and it almost soaks the water up almost immediately because of the binding agent. Now you can see on the tip of my brush I've got some gold on there. I know that's not going to be enough, just because of the nature of this paint. It's because I've experimented with it so long. I'm going to paint in the little moon just here. Got to remember the size so it's not overtaking. And I want those little like reflections in the water as though there's ripples. So I've got a very small brush, a very fine point. And because it's quite a dry brush, I'm able to put reflections on the water quite easily. I'm actually doing a lot more than I normally would, but I think this painting would let me do that. Okay. Now this is my favorite part because I feel like at the moment it looks quite messy. But when we take the tape off, it borders it so beautifully, and it really helps the painting to come out. You can see if I angle it, okay, that painting's still wet, I'm always impatient, but you can see the gold pop at certain angles, and look at now the moon. It's this really bright area. So I'm going to pull off the tape now, and it will reveal the landscape. And that's it. How beautiful. I really, really like it. It worked out how I thought in the head. The focus is on the sky and that sunset feel, but it also feels like we're standing and we're looking at a very vast sea, even though it's quite tiny. So, tell me what you think. Is this something that you followed along with? Is it easy to follow? Let me know. And I'd love to see what you make, so please tag me on whatever socials that you're on and show me your version. I'd love to see it.